Today's science, education, and popular culture still perpetuate racist and sexist representations of human evolution. Since the advent of agriculture and people began settling in one location for extended periods of time, systemic racism and sexism have infiltrated civilization. Early Western scientists were brainwashed with the ethnocentric and misogynistic narratives that pervaded their civilization, including Aristotle in ancient Greece. Charles Darwin, an English biologist, extrapolated the racist and sexist stories he heard and read as a young man to the natural world more than 2,000 years after Aristotle wrote his works. In his 1871 book, The Descent of Man, Darwin presented his prejudiced ideas as scientific truths, outlining his ideas that men are evolutionarily superior to women, Europeans are superior to non-Europeans, and hierarchical civilizations are superior to small egalitarian societies. He compared the appearance of Africans to the New World monkey Pithecia satanas in that book, which is still taught in classrooms and natural history museums, and thought that the hideous ornaments and the equally hideous music admired by most savages were not so highly developed as in certain animals, for example, in birds. In continental Europe, The Descent of Man was released at a time when social unrest was rampant. The Paris Commune, a working-class group in France, went on the streets to demand fundamental social reform, including the dismantling of social hierarchies. Darwin's assertions that the enslavement of the underprivileged, non-Europeans, and women was a natural outcome of evolutionary progress were well received by the elites and those in positions of authority in academia. According to science historian Janet Brown, Darwin's stratospheric rise within Victorian society happened largely because of his racist and sexist writings rather than in spite of them. It is no accident that Darwin was publicly honored as a symbol of English success in conquering nature and civilizing the globe during Victoria's long reign, and granted a state funeral in Westminster Abbey, an honor symbolic of English dominance. Sexist and racist narratives are still prevalent in science, medicine, and education despite the major societal transformations that have taken place over the past 150 years. Rui Diogo is interested in merging his primary academic interests, biology and anthropology, as a professor and researcher at Howard University, to talk about more general societal challenges. We demonstrate how racist and sexist narratives are still prevalent in scientific articles, textbooks, museums, and instructional resources in study Rui Diogo recently published with his Howard University colleague Fatima Jackson and 3 medical students. From art galleries to academic journals, the countless portrayals of human evolution as a linear trend from darker and more primitive human beings to more evolved ones with a lighter skin tone are one example of how biased narratives are still prominent in science today. This pattern has been observed in natural history museums, web pages, and UNESCO heritage sites. The fact that these representations lack scientific accuracy does not stop them from being widely used. Approximately 11% of people alive today are white or descended from Europeans. Images that depict the evolution of humanity or the appearance of modern humans as a whole do not correctly depict either. Furthermore, a gradual whitening of the skin is not supported by scientific research. Fewer populations that traveled to non-African regions with high or low latitudes, such as the northern regions of America, Europe, and Asia, were primarily responsible for the evolution of lighter skin color. Also prevalent today are sexist narratives in academia. For instance, experts looked at the canine teeth of the remains in a 2021 publication on a renowned early human fossil discovered in the Sierra de Atapuerca archaeological site in Spain and discovered that it was actually that of a girl between 9 and 11 years old. Paleoanthropologist José Mara Bermúdez de Castro, one of the authors of that research, wrote a widely read book in 2002 that led to the earlier assumption that the fossil belonged to a boy. The fact that the study's authors acknowledged there was no scientific basis for the fossil bone's initial classification as male is particularly telling. They said that the choice arose at random. However, these decisions are not actually random. Many depictions of human evolution solely feature men. In the limited instances that women are shown, they are typically portrayed as obedient moms rather than creative thinkers, cave painters, or food gatherers, despite the fact that anthropological evidence suggests that prehistoric women were all of those things. Researchers' ongoing discussion of the puzzling evolution of the female orgasm is another illustration of sexist narratives in science. Darwin created stories about how women were sexually passive and coy in evolution, despite the fact that he recognized that most mammalian species females actively choose their sex partners. He argued that such responsibilities only applied to women in early human evolution, since he found it difficult to believe that women could actively participate in choosing a partner. Darwin asserts that men started to sexually pick women later. Numerous pieces of evidence refute sexist claims that women are more coy and less sexual, including the notion that the female orgasm is a biological conundrum. For instance, compared to men, women actually have numerous orgasms more frequently, as well as more complicated, complex, and intense orgasms on average. Though sexist prejudices were considered as scientific fact, women are not naturally less sexual than males. Systemic racism and sexism's destructive cycle. Biased narratives are frequently perpetuated through educational materials like textbooks and anatomical atlases used by scientific and medical students. For instance, the 2017 version of the Netter Atlas of Human Anatomy, which is frequently used by clinical staff and medical students, contains roughly 180 images that depict skin tone. Only 2 of those depict males with darker skin, while the vast majority of those depict males with white skin. This fails to show the whole physical diversity of people and continues to portray white men as the anatomical prototype of the human species. The creators of educational tools for kids mirror the biases seen in textbooks, museums, and scientific journals. For instance, the front cover of the 2016 coloring book, The Evolution of Living Things, depicts the progression of humans from darker, more primitive creatures to a lighter, more civilized Western man. When youngsters who utilize these books grow up to be scientists, journalists, museum curators, politicians, novelists, or illustrators, indoctrination has completed its circle. People who frequently are unaware that the narratives and decisions they make are biased unintentionally reinforce systemic racism and sexism, which is one of its fundamental characteristics. By being more vigilant and proactive in identifying and addressing these influences in their work, academics can challenge entrenched racist, sexist, and Western-centric biases. If false narratives are allowed to persist in science, medicine, education, and the media, they will not only be passed down to future generations but will also justify discrimination, oppression, and atrocities in the past.